This weekend, we begin a new liturgical year. In reading or hearing the gospel, you may have noticed a message or a theme with which the church ended the last liturgical year. In recent weeks, the scripture passages on Sundays and weekdays have noted the accountability that we will have when Jesus comes in judgment, either the dramatic end of the world or our own individual death. And the context of today's gospel passage from St. Mark is clearly Jesus' teaching about his future return in glory and judgment. However, Jesus' return in judgment is only one of the comings or advents of Jesus that we are called to think about during this Advent season. Yes, Jesus will come in power and glory and judgment in a future time, as end of time as we know it. But Advent, in a special way, directs us to the event of his coming into the world, first in his conception in the womb of Mary, and then at his birth in Bethlehem, which we will begin to celebrate at Christmas. It's the great mystery of the Incarnation, God taking on human flesh and dwelling among us. Throughout the Advent season, our first readings will come from great Old Testament prophets who longed for the coming of a Messiah who would bring a restoration to Israel, sometimes described in more political terms, but other times in more clearly spiritual terms. The hope was that a Messiah would restore Israel and call God's people to gather all people into a relationship with God, a relationship uniquely first bestowed upon the Jewish people. The Gospels further on this season will describe the preparation not just for Jesus' birth, but his public ministry with the introduction of John the Baptist. But the final Gospels of the season will describe some immediate preparations for the birth of Jesus. The third advent of Jesus, which we are called to give attention to, is the ongoing advent, the coming into our lives of Jesus each day. It is the Jesus who is available to be present to us in our prayer, in the sacraments, in reflection, and even in our work and fellowship. But there is a subtlety about the presence of Jesus within our secularistic and busy culture. Jesus is not screaming at us or waving his arms frantically. So we have to be looking and then make the effort to really see and hear. That's where today's gospel passage comes in. Jesus said to his disciples, "Be watchful, be alert." Now, while the context of this gospel passage refers to the final coming in judgment, the exhortation is just as applicable to alertness to the ongoing presence of Jesus Christ in our midst. It is being watchful and alert, especially in our hearts and minds. There is so much that is even good that captures our minds and our hearts and can make us less attentive to the ways we can and should assure that Jesus' presence is pivotal in our lives. Now, Advent is in some ways similar to Lent, a time in preparation for a major feast. The liturgy tempers a bit in terms of certain celebratory elements. We don't, however, associate Advent with such Lenten practices as giving something up. I might suggest, however, Advent is a great time to perhaps add something into our life and not just for the season. That could be more prayer, more reflective learning, more service, and all of these will enrich our sense of Jesus' active presence among us. But to do that, it will also be necessary to see what other regular activities might be adjusted to make more time for what celebrates Jesus' daily advent in a personal way. I want to direct our consideration to the particular advent of Jesus Christ that occurs in every Mass, in the Eucharist, as it does this morning. Since here in the U.S. we are in a 3-year Eucharistic revival, leading up to next summer's Eucharistic Congress, I've been looking for the opportunity to speak about the Eucharist in the various parishes where I go. What I've been calling for is that each Catholic would do 2 things. First, each person should take some educational initiative to enhance their knowledge of the Eucharist, especially our faith in and appreciation of the real presence of Jesus Christ under the mere appearance of bread and wine. It is an expression of the Incarnation as Jesus Christ becomes truly present to us in a fleshy way in every Mass. There is a subtlety about this mystery, not unlike the subtlety of the initial Incarnation. Although the Gospel descriptions of the Incarnation will describe some divine interventions and special revelations, those were personal or touched only a few. The ultimate awareness of the mystery of that Incarnation would only come about after the foundation of the Church at Pentecost, would ultimately call for personal expressions of faith in the mystery. Now, there are many resources for this Eucharistic education exercise, and your pastor has made it quite easy for you. I can't think of a better resource than Bishop Barron's book on the Eucharist, This Is My Body, and there are copies of the book to be given out at the various entranceways. I've already read the book, and it's a beautiful and accessible review of our Eucharistic faith. Secondly, I'm calling on people to review the various aspects of their participation in Mass and resolve to make even one change. We might prepare by reading the Scriptures ahead of time. We might come a little early so we can settle in, settle down. We might make more effort to join aloud in singing in common prayer. And since I'm leaving after the weekend, I'll throw this in too. We might even examine how our attire can tell ourselves or others the Mass is special. It is in all the detail of how we worship in the Mass that we send the message to those around us, a message to break through any subtlety. And that message says, look, be watchful, be alert. Something extraordinary is happening in our midst.